How's everybody doing today? I certainly hope you're doing well. Well, it's time for another edition of Story Time. I know it's only been about a week, but you know, you can't stop the creative flow, if you will. When it's there, right? Now, I like to let people know whether or not it's a true story or not. This particular case, 90% of this story is true, and the other 10% is not. The names have been changed to protect certain individuals, you know what I mean? But 90% of it is in fact legitimate. The name of the story is called SIMDOSSY. That's SIMDOSSY. So let's go ahead and begin. But before we do, it's time for a toast. It sure is, because Monty's getting his liquid weather on. Can't you tell? So here we go. Here's to me, here's to you, here's to old, and here's to new. So let's go ahead and start the story about SIMDOSSY. There was an individual by name of Mr. Mansfield. And Mr. Mansfield was a pretty smart guy. He sure was when it came to computers, when it came to programming, when it came to electronics, when it came to circuit boards, when it came to just your everyday dealings with telephony and computers. And Mr. Mansfield, well, he wanted to get into robotics. He already had a master's degree in electronics. Actually, he had a master's degree in computer science. But he was trying out for his PhD, and he wasn't really interested in going to all the classes and going through all that garbage. Whether it be online or in an actual classroom, he wasn't interested in that. Matter of fact, he asked if he could take the test just the way it sits, just right now. And they declined to allow him to do that. They wanted him to go through the classes. They wanted him to go through the online classes, if you will, so that way he could prepare for his PhD. But you see, Mr. Mansfield also was married, and he had a wife that had cancer. She had terminal cancer. And she was given, for the most part, about a year to live. And he knew that. But just because his wife has cancer, does that mean that his entire life stops? No, sir, no, ma'am. It doesn't. It means that because of his mind, because of his technological smarts, he was able to create certain technologies dealing with telephony and dealing with computers back in the 90s that he has patents on with Cisco systems, that he is receiving royalties, about 27 cents per unit of every telephone, in other words smartphone and or laptop sold all over the world, because he has a international patent on his software. Yes, sir, yes, ma'am, he does. So he's not worried about money. He has no worries at all when it comes to the financial class. When you would look at Mr. Mansfield, you would think, look at this bum. Not knowing that this man is a billionaire. You wouldn't even know it. Because he doesn't act like a billionaire. He's eccentric. He tools around in a regular vehicle, and you look at him and you think, this guy's a bum. But this man makes more money in a month than your entire family tree will make in a year. This guy's loaded. But he doesn't abuse his financial worth. He doesn't abuse his wealth. No, sir, no, ma'am. He doesn't. He's all about bettering himself, trying to better the world. That's what it's all about. It's about the principle. It's not about how much you make, how much you're worth. It's about the principle. So Mr. Mansfield is forced to go through some sort of classes. He doesn't want to go through classes because he already understands the technology. He already understands computer science inside and out. Matter of fact, back in the day, we're talking the 80s, he was a DOS writer, a DOS programmer. x86, remember that? Oh my God, it's hysterical. He can run circles around the best computer techie out there in the land. He doesn't give the ambiance that he can, but he can. He sure can. So even though Mr. Mansfield's wife is dying of cancer, his life must go on. But he can afford financially to give her the best care that money can buy. And he's happy to do so. He's brought in nurses, he's brought in maids, he's brought in individuals to take care of his grounds. But you see, his love has turned from computer science to robotics. He wants to create a robot unlike anything that anyone has ever seen before. Because all of the robots that are being made in Japan, or England, or the United States, or Venezuela, even though Venezuela is going through tough times, they still have science departments, or Puerto Rico, or Canada, or Russia. He wants to develop a robot that has emotion. He wants to develop a robot that can actually not only think logically, but have the classic emotions of a human: fear, anger, empathy, sympathy. Right? All of the robots out there are just logical stances. They're not emotional stances. No sir, no ma'am. He wants to create a robot that has the qualities of a human. It's so important to him. So as he's going to all these classes, as he's supposedly learning new things when he already knows these things, he has to appease the educational sorts so that way he can take his test at a later date to obtain that PhD. Meanwhile, he's dealing with all of these other things in real life because his wife, after all, is going to die. I mean, it's just a proven fact. And she probably has a year or less to live. So years go by, and it comes the time for him to take the test. But you see, Mr. Mansfield is a type of person that doesn't like a teacher or a student or an individual peering over him as he's trying to take some sort of test. He's not the type of individual that has a big clock on the wall that's ticking away. Has some sort of time parameters so that he can take this test. But he takes the test. Yeah. And he just barely passes. He passes with a C-, because as brilliant as Mr. Mansfield is, because of the pressure of someone peering over him, some sort of time restraint. It makes him nervous. He's not comfortable. He's not comfortable in his own skin. No, but he passes that test. He sure does, with a C-. So now Mr. Mansfield has a PhD in computer science. He sure does. And you see, that is going to allow him to advance so much further in the corporate world, because that's what it's all about. So Mr. Mansfield creates a robot called SIMDOSSY. But why does he call it SIMDOSSY? Well, back in the day, in the 80s, again, Mr. Mansfield was a specialist when it came to DOS programming. And even though DOS was, for the most part, eliminated in 2000 by Microsoft Windows, he was an old school x86 programmer. He knew it inside and out. He could write it blindfolded. And even though IBM, back in the day, is the one that requested those sorts of things as far as software is concerned, and Mr. Gates himself bought the patent from yet another company and created that software for the personal computer. Mr. Mansfield himself had a hand in that. And because Mr. Mansfield was so brilliant when it came to telecommunications, he himself invented software that every single individual running around in this world that has a smartphone, his software is sitting right in it. Every single person that has a laptop, Mr. Mansfield technology is sitting in their laptops. So try to imagine 27 cents per unit sold either in the telephony division, meaning the telecommunications, and the laptops internationally. Try to imagine how much money that is. But you see, Mr. Mansfield is not about money. He's about principle. He's about dreams. He's about the creativeness of certain technologies that other people either won't invent, can't invent, or refuse to invent. But I'll tell you something right now. He's invented a robot with emotion. With emotion. With emotion of a human. Anger, fear, empathy, sympathy. Who's ever heard such a thing? Can you imagine the companion that would be, to have a robot at your side that would not only have all of the answers as far as a logical stance, but would have those emotions as a human? What kind of friend would that be? But again, why did he call his robot SIMDOSSY? The word DOSSY comes from, Mr. Mansfield used to be an old DOS writer. Oh yeah. But where does the SIM come from? The SIM comes from, within the robot itself, on the right-hand side, in the neck area, there's a SIM card that is placed inside the robot. That SIM card, of course, is the identifier, as all SIM cards are. However, that SIM card holds all of the information dealing with SIMDOSSY. It is programmed using a program called Voco, which is a vocal mimic software. But who did he use the voice for? he used the voice of his wife, because Mr. Mansfield knows damn good and well that his wife is going to die in a year or less. He knows this. He knows it for a fact. But he wants to use his wife's voice as the voice of SIMDOSSY, because he wants to be able to recall. He wants to be able to know that the voice of SIMDOSSY is actually his wife, as never to forget about her existence. Oh, it's very important too. But you see, his wife lived longer than a year. Because after all, when he was in college trying to get his PhD, he was there a couple of years and she's still alive. But it doesn't matter, because her voice is the voice of SIMDOSSY. And let me tell you something right now. He would go up to SIMDOSSY and SIMDOSSY would be sitting there all straight in that. He would say, SIMDOSSY, what is 5 times 5? And in the voice of his wife, SIMDOSSY would say, 5 times 5 is 25. And as Mr. Mansfield would get emotional, hearing his wife's voice through the program Voco that is within the SIM card in the neck area of the robot, he would think to himself, when she dies, and she is going to die, we're all going to die. When she dies, every time SIMDOSSY speaks, it's going to remind Mr. Mansfield of his wife. And he should never forget that. Because let me tell you something, your soulmate is your soulmate, no matter what. People talk about unconditional love all the time. But there's so many conditions placed on love, is there not? Yes, there is. So when people talk about unconditional love, are they really full of it? 9 times out of 10 they are. But you see, Mr. Mansfield is a principle-minded man. He sure is. He doesn't give 2 nickel dicks about money. He doesn't give a crap about status. What he cares about is principle. Principle is everything. Principle is trump. Absolutely. So let me tell you something right now. Mr. Mansfield has a very important meeting that he's supposed to attend in Paris, France, because he's going to take SIMDOSSY to Paris, France, and he's going to show how he has created and programmed a robot that's not only logical and has all of the answers to every point of information you could ever think of. An artificial intelligence that has all the answers. We're talking about a human-looking figure robot that is truly an encyclopedia, that has every answer about math and science, social studies, geography, history, world history, American history, you name it. SIMDOSSY has the answers. But SIMDOSSY has something that all the other robots don't have. The expressions of fear and anger, empathy, sympathy. Imagine what kind of friend that would be. Because everybody and their mother knows that everybody places conditions on friendship. Everybody places conditions on love. Everybody places conditions on relationships, but not SIMDOSSY. Oh, hell no. SIMDOSSY is the epitome of unconditional love. Oh, yeah. Boy, I tell you what, that's something else. That's hard to believe. So Mr. Mansfield, he's getting ready. He's getting ready to go to Paris, France, because he's got a big time show and tell. It's very important to him. Because not only is he going to add to his patent, the patents that he holds with the telephony and the computers, but he's going to add to robotics. If in fact, maybe the French, and after he does his deal in France, maybe he can move forward to Japan or Russia or China. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe SIMDOSSY will be a household name, but that's not the point. The point is to prove that he has programmed a robot, artificial intelligence, that not only is an encyclopedia, but actually holds what no other robot holds: emotion. So he's doing his last programming. He's trying to make sure that everything is just right and perfect. He contacts a company that is a crating company that crates merchandise, puts in the foam and crates it in wood and that sort of thing to protect it for its travel. So the crating company comes in, they crate SIMDOSSY to make sure it's perfect. They put SIMDOSSY crated up on a plane. He boards a plane on a Wednesday. It's late in the afternoon. It's about 4:30. He's got SIMDOSSY sitting over there, of course, in the holding bay for merchandise. He gets on the plane. They fly out to Paris, France. Right? When he arrives, he's going to pick up his suitcases and such. All the suitcases are going around. You know how it is, right? You're at the airport. You're waiting to get your suitcase. But there's some special cargo, SIMDOSSY, he's waiting for. Somebody at the airport, they have a dolly and they're pulling out this crate and they're wheeling it down. They get a little wobbly because SIMDOSSY's a little heavy, see? And all of a sudden the crate falls on its side. Makes a big noise. Kind of damages the crate. Mr. Mansfield's kind of terrified. He's saying, "Oh, jeez, how could you drop SIMDOSSY? Are you kidding me?" He was all pissed off. He gets over there and he takes a crate and SIMDOSSY's on its side, see? And he opens up the crate and he turns it on. Like, "SIMDOSSY, are you okay?" And the eyes are already open on SIMDOSSY. He puts in the SIM card there, right? So he can get some sort of speech out of SIMDOSSY. "SIMDOSSY, are you okay? Or are you on?" "Good afternoon, Mr. Mansfield. What can I do for you?" That's what SIMDOSSY says. He's like, "Oh, thank God. Oh, thank goodness. You're all right. You fell down." And SIMDOSSY is sideways, see? Side of the crate is open. SIMDOSSY's sideways. So Mr. Mansfield takes his shoe, puts up the crate, and he tries to hammer it back together the best he can with his shoe. He grabs his luggage. He has another person at the airport, certainly not the person that dropped him, but he calls somebody else to help wheel SIMDOSSY. He's got his luggage. He's walking out to the door. He calls a taxi. Of course, he gets a van because he's got to transport SIMDOSSY to the hotel, because the following day he's got an important meeting. He sure does. With some of the top officials in France. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. It's so important that he gets there. It's so important that he goes to his hotel and makes absolutely sure that when SIMDOSSY fell on its side and the crate was damaged, even though it didn't hurt SIMDOSSY, it appears that it didn't, he's got to go through all the steps of emotion, of anger and fear, empathy, sympathy with SIMDOSSY to make sure that when his presentation, that everything is apropos. So he gets SIMDOSSY to the hotel. And he uncrates gently, because he's got to crate it back up, because he's got to go for a meeting at the offices. He pulls SIMDOSSY out, and he puts in the SIM card again. He's having a little conversation with SIMDOSSY. Because you see, SIMDOSSY can be active for 72 hours without a recharge. That's incredible. It sure is. Not only going through all of the informational relay that it's been programmed for, but it can also go through all of the emotions. But whose voice is being used for SIMDOSSY? Of course, it's his wife. We already stated that early in the story, didn't we? That's really important. Because he knows that his wife is going to die. We are all going to die. But the whole reason why he used his wife's voice through the vocal programming is so that she would always be in his memories. He would never forget his wife. And he could hear his wife. Because Voco, after all, is a voice mimicking software. And it is flawless. Truly is. For all of you people that deal with Adobe Photoshop, this is the Adobe Photoshop version except through voice. Wow. Amazing. Truly amazing. So he beds down for the night. He's sleeping. He's kind of tossing and turning because he's thinking, what a glorious day it's going to be tomorrow when he can share, he can show, and other people can experience SIMDOSSY. This is a monumental event. Nobody has ever programmed such a robot to display human emotion. No way. Nobody's done it. He's got a big day tomorrow. So he's having a hard time sleeping. He's tossing and turning, carrying on. 7 o'clock rolls around. His alarm's going, meep, 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 meep. You know how annoying that is, right? So he hits his alarm. He's doing a little snoozing in, right? Because he went to bed late. Meep, 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 meep. He gets up. He's got to be at the office 9 o'clock. He calls another van. He goes to the office. He's got SIMDOSSY right by his side, but she's all crated up. She sure is. Oh, yeah. He uncrates SIMDOSSY, and there's a whole bunch of people there. We're talking a panel. We're not talking about 1 or 2 people. We're talking a panel of people plus an entire audience. And you see, the panel of people are going to pull people out of the audience at random. Yes, sir, yes, ma'am. That's what we're going to do. They sure are. Because they want to make sure that SIMDOSSY is going to be able to perform, as Mr. Mansfield had stated, not only in written form, but in video form. So he goes up to SIMDOSSY himself as he's explaining. He's got a big old screen up there and he's hitting the little button and it's going from a slideshow to a slideshow. He's trying to go through on how he created SIMDOSSY, whose voice is SIMDOSSY, why it's named SIMDOSSY, right? Very important stuff here. And then he asks SIMDOSSY a basic question. He says to SIMDOSSY, SIMDOSSY, who do you call if a crime has been committed? And SIMDOSSY says, you call the police. That is right. That is who you call. Very good. But you see, the backstory was, and a lot of people don't know this, and you probably don't know this, but I'm going to share it with you because I can, because I'm the creator of this story. But you see, back in the day, SIMDOSSY had a hard time pronouncing P. When Mr. Mansfield asked SIMDOSSY, who do you call if a crime has been committed, SIMDOSSY said, you call the police, because SIMDOSSY didn't know how to pronounce P. And how Mr. Mansfield taught SIMDOSSY to pronounce P correctly is he used a piece of paper. Yes, sir, yes, ma'am, that's what he did. Even though SIMDOSSY cannot breathe air and exhale air, how he did it was, he said, SIMDOSSY, this is how you pronounce P. Police. Police. That's how he did it. He sure did. And that's a backstory, because he wrote up on a piece of paper. I just happen to have the piece of paper here if I can find it. Because SIMDOSSY was having a hard time pronouncing P. Oh, here it is right here. You think I'm kidding? I'm not kidding. Monty's got all this stuff handled, see? Because when I was creating the story, I had to have all this stuff ready. See that? There it is right there. Sure is. So Mr. Mansfield wrote this little phrase. He said to SIMDOSSY, he said, please propose to the police to provide perfect protection for the people. Pretty slick, right? So he took that piece of paper, and that's how he was pronouncing P. Right? And SIMDOSSY did learn how to say P, so he was relieved when he said, who do you call when somebody has committed a crime? You call the police. He was like, yeah, baby. Because SIMDOSSY had remembered. SIMDOSSY had remembered all the P's. And matter of fact, Mr. Mansfield had to write and program every name, every word with P. Oh, it was mind-boggling. Horrible. So the panel was sitting there pretty impressed. They're, wow, SIMDOSSY's doing pretty good. Right on. So they bring somebody up from the crowd at random. And somebody sits down there, and somebody from the panel comes over and whispers in their ear. And the person from the panel says to the person sitting down, says, I want you to become emotional. Let's see how SIMDOSSY does if you are emotional and SIMDOSSY isn't. That's what the panel whispered in the person's ear. And the person sitting there, and she's acting like she's all bent out of shape. She's crying and carrying on, but she's just acting because she wants to see if SIMDOSSY will display some sort of sympathy. And SIMDOSSY does. SIMDOSSY changes from a very static, if you were, a very simple, simplistic words of, you call the police, instead of like that, the tone changes. Oh yeah. Because that's how Mr. Mansfield programmed SIMDOSSY. That when the tone changes of the human, the tone changes with SIMDOSSY. So SIMDOSSY is telling the person, I'm so sorry to hear that. What can I do to comfort you? So the tone has changed in SIMDOSSY as well. Then another person from the panel comes over and takes some fire, lights up a torch, puts it close to SIMDOSSY. You are scaring me. You are scaring me. Please keep that fire away from me. And SIMDOSSY is acting as if a human would act, but under an electronic stance when it comes to fear. Oh yeah. But you see, is Mr. Mansfield willing to allow a third party take SIMDOSSY for 72 hours? That's 3 days. Wow, that's a long time. To be able to give your creation to a third party unattended. Wow, that's asking a lot. But he's got to do it. He's got to do it. He's got to be able to prove, without a shadow of a doubt, this SIMDOSSY can be unattended for 72 hours with a third party where he has absolutely no control, remotely or otherwise, of what's going on. And he does exactly that. He goes back to his hotel, but you see, here's the thing, because Mr. Mansfield is not stupid. No sir, no ma'am. Mr. Mansfield had within SIMDOSSY a GPS monitor. He sure did. To let him know exactly where SIMDOSSY was at all times down to an inch. Because he ain't dumb. And he wants to know where his prized possession is. So he's monitoring that remotely. He's like, okay, they're there. Even though he doesn't speak a lick of French. He doesn't know anything about that. But you see, the good thing is, SIMDOSSY is only programmed for English. There is no French. Sorry, none. No sir, no ma'am. It's only English. If you try to speak French to SIMDOSSY, it's not going to understand because all of the programming parameters were in English. And he did that intentionally. So that way, another foreign entity could not manipulate the programming of what it's being programmed as. That is English. So he's waiting 3 days. It's very, for Mr. Mansfield, it's very mind-boggling. He's like, you know, he knows that SIMDOSSY is here, and then now it's being moved, and now it's being moved, and now it's being moved. And every time he turns around, he pulls up the program to find out what SIMDOSSY is somewhere else. And he pulls up a program, and now suddenly SIMDOSSY is at the presidential palace in France. What the hell is SIMDOSSY doing in the presidential palace in France? What the hell is going on? He picks up the phone. He makes a call because he's pissed off. He's thinking, wait a minute. We went from a board of directors of a private company, and suddenly, somehow, some way, SIMDOSSY is in the clinches of a government entity which he is not in favor of. He's pissed off. So he gets on the phone again, and he's talking to the person he set up the meeting with. Hey, listen, what's going on? He's raising all kinds of hell. And what it boils down to is one of the people within the panel had stated, well, we were so impressed with SIMDOSSY, we wanted to show our government, our leadership. They wanted to see it. They requested it. You did give an unabated 72-hour, hands-free, total reign of SIMDOSSY. Did you not? He's like, yes, I did. He's like, then stop bitching. Okay? Stop crying. So, the 72 hours is nearing. 71 hours later, he goes back to the place with his van, and he goes to pick up SIMDOSSY. He brings a crate in the whole 9 yards, right? Because he's got to recrate SIMDOSSY and bring back to the hotel, fly back to the United States. So, he goes to where he had his big old meeting and that with the audience and the panel and all that stuff. He goes to pick up SIMDOSSY. SIMDOSSY is there, waiting. He's like, SIMDOSSY, did you have a good time? Did you learn a lot? And SIMDOSSY is kind of tired, and the power is about ready to go out on SIMDOSSY, and SIMDOSSY says, I am tired. And then, for the most part, shuts it down. So he pulls the SIM card out of the neck, he crates up SIMDOSSY, and he wants to do some sort of analytics on SIMDOSSY. Exactly where they went, what they said, all that stuff. Because everything is being recorded. Just like on your computer. Just like on your phone. Everything that you do on that computer, everything that you type, everything that you say, everything that you read, everything that you see is being recorded and can be retrieved that quick. And a lot of people don't know this, even today. It's ridiculous. But these are facts. So he can't wait until he gets back to the United States so he can set it up, get on his mainframe, and pull up all the information, every single word out of SIMDOSSY's mouth. So, creates up SIMDOSSY, gets on a plane, flies SIMDOSSY and himself back to the United States. He goes to his lab, he pulls out the SIM card, puts it inside the neck of SIMDOSSY, does a charge on it, says to SIMDOSSY, "SIMDOSSY, did you have a good time?" SIMDOSSY doesn't say a word. Nothing. Mr. Mansfield is getting a little concerned. He goes, "SIMDOSSY, what is 5 times 5? SIMDOSSY doesn't say a word, not a peep. Whereas before, SIMDOSSY said 5 times 5 is 25. But SIMDOSSY didn't say a peep, nothing. He's really, really concerned. Pulls up the entire dossier of SIMDOSSY for the past 4 days. He's looking at it on his computer. He finds out everything that is being said, all the questions being asked. He's quite confused. Why is SIMDOSSY broken? Why is SIMDOSSY not saying anything? What the hell is going on? So Mr. Mansfield looked deeper into the programming to see if possibly SIMDOSSY was reprogrammed somewhere along the way, because he's not really sure. And he notices that there's a secondary GPS that has been installed into the hardware of SIMDOSSY. Why would that be? And he was thinking, well, hold on a second. The last place that SIMDOSSY was at was the governmental palace in France. So it's quite possible that the government of France has installed a GPS beacon to identify his location where he was in the United States. He's pissed off, boy. Oh, is he pissed off. He removes that, but it's too late because now they have his location of where his lab is in the United States. The French government does. And for some reason, SIMDOSSY is not talking anymore. And when he looks into the deep programming, he notices a brand new language. It's not the language that he wrote. And it's not French either. It's half French, half English. It's very strange. It's very bizarre. Because it's not even the French language, so to speak. And he's trying to figure out how in the hell did this get on there? Well, as he's doing some deep probing into SIMDOSSY, he notices that the characters have been rewritten into half English and what looks to be French. Man, he can't figure it out. It's almost like a virus. What the hell is going on? So then what he did was he typed out a bunch of French words. And he took those words and he turned them sideways. But why would Mr. Mansfield take that French paragraph, all of these words, and turn them sideways? Because that's what he was looking at. The program had changed from half English to half French, but sideways. How is that possible? Well, we know how it's possible. And Mr. Mansfield figured out how it's possible. Because the artificial intelligence, when the crate of SIMDOSSY was dropped by the person at the airport on the dolly, SIMDOSSY was sideways. And as he opened the crate to see if SIMDOSSY was okay, SIMDOSSY is looking at all of the advertisements and the posters on the wall and the writing on the wall in French, but sideways. That's how. And he knew it. That's exactly how. Because SIMDOSSY is learning itself and reprogramming itself. But why? So now Mr. Mansfield has to deprogram SIMDOSSY and start all over. He sure does. He sure does. It's about 5:15 p.m. on Monday, early evening. Mr. Mansfield gets a call. His wife has died. Sure has. He knew that call was going to come in. He just didn't know when. So he races home. Of course he's upset. That was his wife, right? And SIMDOSSY isn't working anymore because when SIMDOSSY fell or was dropped by the person at the airport that cared not about SIMDOSSY or what was in the crate, and the crate was opened up, SIMDOSSY saw French, except sideways. SIMDOSSY incorporated the French and the English later down the line and reprogrammed itself. Meanwhile, his wife is no longer with us. So he goes to the funeral, makes all the arrangements. He's crushed. He knew it was coming because he was prepared. That's the thing. He was prepared. He knew the day would come. He knew it would come pretty quick. He was aware of it. She was aware of it. But the day is there. He goes to the funeral, kind of sets SIMDOSSY aside. He's got bigger fish to fry, if you know what I mean. After the funeral, after all the things are taken care of, and the insurance and the house and power of attorney and all that crap, he comes back to SIMDOSSY because he wants to hear his wife's voice. But he can't hear his wife's voice because he's got to reprogram SIMDOSSY, because SIMDOSSY has taken upon itself to rewrite the programming half in French and half in English, except sideways. It's all gibberish. So it takes Mr. Mansfield weeks to reprogram SIMDOSSY because he wants to hear his wife's voice. That was the whole intention of using her voice in the first place. So that way he would never forget. He could always hear her voice. So he reprograms SIMDOSSY. And he thinks he's got everything sound. He sits down and he says to SIMDOSSY, "SIMDOSSY, what is 5 times 5? And SIMDOSSY comes out in his wife's voice and says, 5 times 5 is 25. And you know something? Mr. Mansfield is so happy. 1, that he can hear his wife's voice. 2, that SIMDOSSY is working again. Thank God. He's worked so hard. Mr. Mansfield is actually in tears. And he actually reaches out to SIMDOSSY to give it a hug, even though it's a robot. He knows it's a robot. But to hear his wife's voice has overcome him. It's true magic. It truly is. And as he tries to get himself back together again, because he knows he has to do all the programming, and God forbid he's got to do all the programming of the P's, because SIMDOSSY had a problem saying P's back in the day. Remember when he did the please propose to the police to provide perfect protection for the people? He's got to go through all that again. I mean, really, something else. So he's going through all the programming parameters. Then he decides to ask SIMDOSSY a very serious question. A question that he's never ever asked SIMDOSSY before. A question that is not in the encyclopedia. A question that is not in the dictionary. A question that he did not program SIMDOSSY for. He's curious to know for himself, will SIMDOSSY answer the question? A question that was not programmed into SIMDOSSY. But what is the question? Mr. Mansfield gets himself together. He sits there very firmly and he says, SIMDOSSY, why did I create you? And SIMDOSSY starts looking around the eyes. You created me to remember humans. And he's like, oh my God, SIMDOSSY actually answered me. I created you so that you would remember humans? That's deep. Oh, that's deep. Because after all, SIMDOSSY and robots do not breathe air or exhale air. However, if all of the mammals, if all of the amphibians, if all of the humans were suddenly to be no more, who is left to tell the story about Earth? SIMDOSSY. I'm Monograph, and if you can't speak freely, you're simply not free. Have a good day.